Welcome to Tales by Felix, where every story unlocks a new world. Remember to subscribe, like and share. Let's begin. The rain had stopped, but the smell of wet earth clung to the air as David pulled into the driveway of his parents' home. The small white house with the neatly trimmed hedges had always been a place of warmth for him, yet tonight, his hands wouldn't stop sweating on the steering wheel. Lisa sat beside him, her hands resting protectively on her small but visible baby bump. She looked at the house through the windshield, her expression a mix of nervousness and hope. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. David forced a smile. "They're my parents. I have to tell them. It's better they hear it from me. From us." Lisa nodded, though her eyes still betrayed her fear. I want them to like me, David. For our baby's sake." "They will," David said, though the tightness in his voice made it sound more like a plea than a promise. He stepped out, came around, and opened her door. The living room smelled of baked chicken and rosemary. His mother, Evelyn, was at the dining table setting out the last of the dishes. His father, Thomas, sat in his recliner reading the newspaper, the same way he had for as long as David could remember. "David!" Evelyn's face lit up for a brief second, until her eyes landed on Lisa. "Oh," she said flatly. "You brought company." "Hi, Mrs. Miller," Lisa said softly, offering a small smile. "It's nice to meet you." Evelyn looked her up and down, the way someone sizes up a stranger at their doorstep, and said, "Dinner's almost ready." Then she disappeared into the kitchen. Thomas lowered his paper slowly. "So," he said, his voice low and gruff, "who's this?" "This is Lisa," David said, his heart pounding. "She's my girlfriend." Thomas's brow furrowed. "Girlfriend. I see." There was a beat of silence, then David took a deep breath. "And she's pregnant." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Evelyn reappeared from the kitchen, a serving spoon in her hand. "She's what?" Lisa looked down, her fingers tightening on her lap. "Yes," David said firmly. "I'm going to be a father." Evelyn's face froze, and Thomas leaned back slowly in his chair. The living room, once cozy, suddenly felt like a courtroom. Dinner was a tense affair. The chicken was perfectly roasted, the potatoes buttery and soft, but no one seemed to taste a thing. Evelyn broke the silence first. "Lisa, dear, where are your parents?" "They're out of state," Lisa said politely. We haven't been in close contact lately." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "So you don't have family here?" David shot him a look. "Dad." Evelyn cut in. "And how exactly do you two plan to raise a child? You're still finding your feet, David. This is irresponsible." David set his fork down. "We'll manage. We'll figure it out together." Evelyn shook her head. "Figure it out? You can't even support yourself properly right now. You're going to drag her into your mess." Lisa spoke softly but firmly. "With respect, Mrs. Miller, we're not asking for permission. We just wanted to share our news." Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "News? This isn't news. This is a disaster." David's chest tightened. "Mom." Thomas slammed his palm on the table, making the cutlery rattle. "Enough. You have two choices, son. You either stay here, focus on building a proper future, and put an end to this nonsense," he jabbed a finger toward Lisa, "or you walk out with her and do it on your own. No help from us. No money. Nothing." The words sliced through the air. David's knuckles whitened around his fork. Lisa's eyes glistened, but she sat tall, refusing to crumble. "You're asking me to choose between my family and the woman carrying my child?" David's voice trembled with anger. Thomas didn't flinch. "Yes." By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the decision was made. David stood on the porch with 3 black garbage bags stuffed with his clothes and belongings. Lisa stood beside him, her sweater pulled tight over her bump. The sky was dark and heavy with clouds. Evelyn watched from the doorway, her arms crossed. "You're making a mistake, David." David met her gaze. The mistake would be turning my back on her, and on our child. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Thomas stepped forward, holding out a crumpled $20 bill. "For gas," he said. That's all you'll get from me. David looked at the bill, then at his father. Keep it. He turned and walked to the car, his jaw tight. Lisa climbed in, silent tears streaking her cheeks. David started the engine, the headlights cutting through the drizzle. As they pulled away, Evelyn's figure shrank in the rearview mirror, a silhouette framed by the warm light of the home that was no longer his. The rain returned, harder this time, drumming against the roof of David's old sedan. They parked in a dimly lit lot near a 24-hour diner, the neon sign flickering "Open" in tired red letters. David leaned back in the driver's seat, staring at the ceiling. Lisa was curled up beside him, wrapped in a blanket. "You okay?" he asked. She gave him a faint smile. "We'll make it." He wanted to believe her. "Yeah, we will." But inside, doubt gnawed at him. He had less than $50 in his account, no apartment, no plan. The only thing he was sure of was that he couldn't let her down. At around 2 a.m., the sound of rain was replaced by the low hum of a semi-truck passing on the highway. David closed his eyes, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him steady. The shelter smelled faintly of disinfectant and old blankets. They'd been there for 3 weeks now, crammed into a small room with a single bed and a cracked window. Lisa went into labor in the early hours of a cold Tuesday morning. The nearest hospital was a 15-minute drive, and they barely made it in time. David held her hand through every contraction, whispering encouragement, fighting back tears as she screamed. When their daughter, Mia, was born, the world outside seemed to pause. David held the tiny bundle, her skin warm and soft, her cries sharp and alive. Back at the shelter, the reality hit. David worked double shifts at a gas station, often coming home after midnight. Lisa sat by the window during the day, selling handmade beaded bracelets on the sidewalk. One chilly afternoon, as Lisa's fingers moved over the string of beads, a tall man in a dark coat stopped in front of her. "How much for this one?" he asked, pointing to a bracelet. $5, Lisa said. He handed her a 20. "Keep the change." Before walking away, he placed a business card in her hand. "If you and your husband ever need work, call me." Lisa stared at the card long after he'd gone. It read, "Daniel Harper, Real Estate Investments." When David came home that night, exhausted and smelling of gasoline, Lisa handed him the card. "Maybe," she said softly, "this is the start of something." David looked at the card, then at her. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in his eyes. The next morning, David stared at the business card on the kitchen counter like it was a winning lottery ticket he wasn't sure was real. Lisa watched him from the doorway, holding baby Mia in her arms. "You should call," she said. David hesitated. People don't just hand out jobs to strangers on the street. Lisa smirked. "You forget, we're not strangers anymore. He bought one of my bracelets." David laughed, the sound surprising him. All right, I'll call." He dialed the number. After 2 rings, a calm, confident voice answered. "Daniel Harper speaking." Hi, this is David Miller. My girlfriend Lisa met you yesterday." "Ah, yes. The bracelets." There was a smile in Daniel's voice. "You sound like a man who could use some steady work." David cleared his throat. "That's fair to say. Come by this address tomorrow morning. Bring work clothes. I'll see what you can do." The next day, David arrived at a half-renovated townhouse on the edge of the city. The front door was open, and the smell of sawdust hung in the air. Daniel, wearing a crisp button-down shirt and jeans, greeted him with a firm handshake. "You ever done handyman work before?" Daniel asked. "Some," David said. "I'm good with tools." "Good. Let's start with that broken window upstairs." 4 hours, David repaired windows, patched drywall, and fixed a squeaky door hinge. Sweat soaked through his shirt, but the work felt satisfying. Daniel watched quietly, occasionally nodding in approval. At the end of the day, Daniel handed him an envelope. Inside was more cash than David had made in a week at the gas station. "Call me when you're ready for more," Daniel said. David drove home that night with his heart pounding. For the first time in months, he felt like a door had opened. Daniel called again the next week. This time, David brought Lisa along. She's got an eye for detail, David told him. Thought maybe she could help. Daniel raised an eyebrow but agreed. The property they were working on was a run-down duplex, its walls yellowed with age and its floors warped. As David replaced floorboards, Lisa wandered through the rooms, sketching quick designs in a notebook. By the end of the day, she showed Daniel her ideas: brighter paint, open shelving in the kitchen, softer lighting. Daniel studied the sketches. Not bad, he said. Tell you what, I'll give you a budget. You handle the interior look. Let's see what happens. Lisa threw herself into the work. She sourced thrift store furniture, repainted cabinets, and added cozy touches: a vase of wildflowers, a patterned rug, a bookshelf in the corner. When the duplex was ready, Daniel brought in a realtor. The place sold in 2 weeks, well above asking price. Daniel grinned at them. Looks like I've got a renovation team. The weeks turned into months. David and Lisa worked side by side, renovating houses for Daniel and slowly building a reputation. Their days started early, David loading tools into the truck while Lisa packed Mia's diaper bag. Mia often came along, napping in her stroller while her parents painted walls or assembled furniture. They rented a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was theirs. The first night there, Lisa cooked pasta on the tiny stove, and they ate sitting on the floor because they didn't own a table yet. This, David said, raising his plastic cup of water, is the start of something big. Lisa smiled. To us. They worked through blisters, paint-stained clothes, and late nights. Every paycheck, they saved a little more. Slowly, the dream of owning their own project, their own house, began to take shape. It happened on a rainy Saturday. David saw a flyer for a property auction, a crumbling duplex on the edge of the city. They went to see it. The place was a mess: broken windows, peeling wallpaper, a roof that leaked. But Lisa walked through it with wide eyes. This could be beautiful, she whispered. The auction was crowded. David's heart raced as the bidding started low but climbed fast. When the auctioneer shouted, "Sold!" David could hardly believe it. The house was theirs. For the next 3 months, they poured everything into it. David worked 12-hour days fixing the roof, replacing wiring, and sanding floors. Lisa handled the design, turning each room into a warm, inviting space. When they finally put it on the market, it sold for triple what they paid. The profit was more money than they'd ever seen at once. David stared at the check in disbelief. We did it. Lisa threw her arms around him. Told you it could be beautiful. The sale changed everything. Word spread fast. Friends of Daniel's, other investors, even strangers started reaching out, asking if David and Lisa could handle their properties. They upgraded their tools, bought a used work truck, and even hired 2 helpers. One afternoon, as David installed a new kitchen backsplash in a client's home, Mia toddled into the room, her first steps. Lisa gasped, dropping the roll of wallpaper in her hands. David scooped her up, laughing. Our little girl's walking in one of our houses. It was more than work now, it was building a life, a future. They didn't know it yet, but the success they were stacking brick by brick would soon lead them back to the very doorstep where their journey began, and to the parents who had once shut that door in their faces. The morning mail came bundled with invoices and 2 catalogs. David sifted through them absent-mindedly until a thick, official-looking envelope slid free. The return address hit him like a fist: County Clerk and Recorder, Foreclosure Division. He frowned. We don't own anything in this district, he muttered. Lisa, balancing Mia on her hip, glanced over. Open it. David tore the seal. The words blurred for a beat, like his mind refused to read them. Notice of foreclosure proceedings, 84 Maple Lane. His parents' address. He read it again. Slower. Colder. David. Lisa's voice softened. What does it say? He exhaled, steadying his voice. They're about to lose the house. Lisa set Mia in her playpen and moved closer, her hand sliding into his. I'm so sorry. He stared at the paper, 100 memories rushing in: forts under the dining table, late-night homework with his mother's cocoa, his father's stern lessons and grudging pride. And then the last memory: black garbage bags on the porch, Lisa's tears in the rain. He folded the letter carefully, like it might break. I need to see it. I need to know what's going on. Lisa nodded. Then we go." They drove in silence. The neighborhood looked smaller, the trees taller. When they pulled up, David's chest tightened. The lawn, once a clipped green carpet, was a wild patchwork. The white paint peeled like sunburnt skin. A "final notice" was taped inside the window. David climbed the steps. The wood creaked under his boots like a warning. His knock echoed. After a moment, the chain slid. His mother's eye appeared in the gap, older, ringed with purple shadows. "David!" The chain rattled again, and she opened the door wider. "You look," she trailed off, taking in his work jacket, the man he'd grown into. Her eyes flicked behind him, seeing Lisa in the car with Mia. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. Evelyn swallowed. "Your father's not well." She stepped aside. "You should come in." The house smelled like dust and something bitter. The framed photos were still on the wall, but a few were askew. They passed the dining table, the court of judgment, and entered the living room. Thomas sat small in his recliner, shoulders caved, a newspaper folded but unread on his lap. His jaw tightened at the sight of David, then of Lisa through the window, then the baby. "We got a notice," David said, keeping his voice even. "What happened?" Thomas's mouth worked. He looked away. Evelyn answered instead, voice trembling. "After you left, things changed. Your father retired early. The company cut benefits. Then the roof. Then the medical bills." "We'll handle it," Thomas barked, but the bark was brittle. "We always have." David's gaze drifted to the ceiling's water stains. "Dad, this place needs more than handling." Silence stretched. The air carried unsaid words like dust motes, heavy, everywhere. From the doorway, Lisa said gently, "Hi, Mrs. Miller." She lifted Mia. "This is Mia." Evelyn's hand rose to her throat, eyes glassy. She took a small step forward, then stopped herself, pride freezing her in place. Thomas's eyes darted to the foreclosure letter in David's hand. "We'll figure it out," he muttered. "We don't need charity." David nodded once. "I didn't offer charity." He pocketed the letter, a plan taking root he hadn't yet admitted to himself. "I'll be in touch." He turned to go, but Evelyn's whisper followed, fragile and aching, "We never stopped praying for you." David paused. The words knocked something loose in his chest. He wanted to say 1,000 things. He settled for, "I know." Outside, Lisa squeezed his arm. "What are you thinking?" David stared at the sagging porch, the house that was both cradle and wound. "I'm thinking we don't let that house swallow them." That night, David couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan hummed a slow orbit over their bed while rain ticked against the window. He saw flashes of the house, his mother rolling dough on Sunday mornings, his father showing him how to fix a leaky faucet with large, patient hands, the cruel symmetry of those black bags at the door. Beside him, Lisa turned. "You're awake." He exhaled. "Yeah." "What would saving them look like?" she asked, voice a whisper in the dark. He stared at the ceiling. "They're too proud to take a check. Even if we had that kind of cash just lying around." He paused. "But there's an auction date on that notice. If someone buys the house before the bank." Lisa propped herself on an elbow. "We buy it." He turned, startled. "Lisa." "We buy it," she repeated, firmer. "Not to take it from them. To save it. And then we figure out how to give it back without making them feel small." He blinked. "You want to buy the same house they kicked us out of?" Lisa's smile was sad and brave. "I want to write a new last page to that chapter. I want Mia to know that when you have the power to heal a wound, you try." David ran a hand over his face, a long breath leaving him. "Buying it would mean we inherit all its problems, foundation, roof, electrical." She shrugged gently. "That's what we do, isn't it?" He laughed once, soft. "Yeah, that's what we do." A hush settled, warm this time. Lisa reached for his hand. "Also, there's something you should know." He turned, alert. "What?" She smiled, nervous and radiant. "We're going to need a bigger table soon." He stared, comprehension dawning. "You're?" She nodded, tears bright. I found out yesterday. I wanted to tell you when you were ready to hear good news. David closed his eyes, a throat-twisting mix of joy and terror hitting at once. He laughed through a breath. Okay. He kissed her forehead, then her palms, then the curve of her belly. We'll buy the house, he murmured. We'll fix what's broken, in the beams, in the wiring, in us. Lisa's eyes shone. That's my David. They spent the week preparing like generals before a campaign. David gathered comparables, pulled permits, read every line about liens and arrears. Lisa ran the numbers, built 3 budget scenarios, and called Daniel. You're asking me to back you on a family property? Daniel asked, skeptical but intrigued. We won't need backing, David said. We have enough to secure it. But the rehab will be tight. We could use short-term bridge financing, at market, no favors. Daniel was quiet for a moment, weighing not just the deal but the man on the phone. You know mixing business and family gets messy. Which is why the contract will be clean, David replied. We'll treat it like any other project. All right, Daniel said. Send me your plan. Lisa crafted it like a letter to the future. Scope, roof replacement, foundation stabilization, east corner, full electrical rewiring, plumbing update for the upstairs bath, interior cosmetic rehab. Timeline, 8 weeks. Exit strategy A. Sell back to owners via land contract with reduced down payment and monthly terms they can meet. Exit strategy B. Create a trust with us as trustees to hold the deed until the home is stabilized, then transfer. Exit strategy C. Lease to own with a symbolic rent credit to preserve dignity. Daniel called the next morning. You wrote 3 exits, he said, a note of admiration. Most folks barely write one. Lisa smiled into the phone. We've learned to give life more than one way out. Your numbers are tight, Daniel said. But doable. You have my bridge funding, standard terms. David felt a knot loosen. Thank you. They circled the auction date on the kitchen calendar, a red ring that seemed to pulse with history. Meanwhile, they kept working their other jobs, heads down, hearts thudding. David drove past 84 Maple every other day, noting the gutter sag, the chimney cracks, the way the house seemed to hold its breath. One evening, parked across the street, he watched the living room window. Evelyn crossed the room, a hand to her lower back. Thomas shuffled in behind, then stopped, staring blankly at the mantel. David knew his father had started counting victories in life on one hand, a habit of men who fear their tally has run out. Lisa touched his wrist. We're not just saving wood and brick. I know, he said. We're saving the place that taught me how to swing a hammer, and how it can also hurt. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Then let's swing it right. The county hall was full of tense whispers and clacking heels. Bidders clustered with clipboards and tablets. Eyes darted, measuring one another. David's palms were steady. Lisa stood to his left, Daniel to his right, a quiet triangle of purpose. Daniel had insisted on being there. It helps to have witnesses when life changes. A clerk took the dais. Case 77A, 391, property located at 84 Maple Lane. Bidding will start at. The number was low, insultingly low for the home David grew up in, but high enough to scare off casual flippers. Hands lifted. Numbers volleyed. Each bid felt like a tug on a rope tied to David's heart. A heavy-set man in a charcoal suit locked eyes with David after his third bid. The man's smirk said, I've done this 1,000 times. This is just meat to me. David stared back, expression blank. The price climbed. Lisa's hand found David's. We stop at the ceiling, she whispered. We promised. I know. Going once, the clerk called. The man in charcoal flicked 2 fingers to add another increment without looking up. Going twice. Daniel's voice, calm and surgical. One more. David nodded, lifted his card. The clerk pointed. New high bid. Charcoal suit lifted his card again, a bored gesture, then narrowed his eyes when the clerk ignored him. The clerk checked her ledger. Sir, your credit check flagged an issue. You'll need to step aside. A murmur rippled. Charcoal suit bristled, then stepped back, fury pinched at the corners of his mouth. Going once, the clerk called again. Going twice, sold. The gavel struck with a sound that felt like time snapping. David didn't breathe for a second. Lisa squeezed his fingers, blinking up tears. Daniel clapped his shoulder once. Now the real work begins. Outside, the air felt brighter. David stared at the stamped receipt, his name attached to 84 Maple. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 ways, thirst for triumph, taste for revenge. Instead, what rose in him was gentler, harder, resolve. "Let's get to work," he said. They scheduled the crew for dawn. David unlocked the front door to a groan of hinges that sounded like a complaint. "We'll oil you later," he murmured, stepping inside. He drew a breath, bracing. Up close, the house's wounds were raw, blistered paint, buckled floorboards, a hairline crack webbing the dining room wall. "Demolition first," he told the team, voice crisp. "Careful with the crown molding in the living room. It's original. Salvage what you can. Kitchen cabinets. Remove, don't sledge. We'll refinish." Lisa unfolded her notebook, delegating with grace. "We're preserving soul, nothing sterile. Warm whites, walnut accents, matte brass fixtures. We reclaim light." Outside, a car door slammed. David's spine tightened. He turned to find Evelyn at the curb, a paper bag of groceries collapsing slightly in her arms. She stared at the work truck, the crew, the open door. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice small and sharp at the same time. David wiped his hands on a rag and went to her. "Mom, let me help with that." She didn't move. "What are you doing in my house?" He nodded toward the cracked eaves. "Saving it." Her eyes glossed. "Did the bank send you?" The words were desperate, almost a plea to be spared humiliation. "They didn't send me," he said carefully. She swallowed. "Then who did?" David held her gaze. "Me." Evelyn blinked. The groceries slipped. He caught the bag with a quick hand, set it on the hood. "You?" Lisa stepped forward, gentle as a nurse. "We came to fix what's broken, Mrs. Miller." Evelyn swayed a little, as if the ground had tilted. "Fix? How?" "We can't. We don't have." "It's not about money today," David said. "It's about roof, wiring, floors, safety, dignity." He softened. "And maybe, us." Tears spilled over. She looked away toward the oak tree where David had once swung from a tire his father hung. "Your father will never accept this." "Then don't call it help," David said, a wry tenderness in his tone. "Call it renovation." A voice scraped behind them. "Renovation." Thomas stood at the porch, face set hard, eyes wet. "This is pity." "We don't take pity." David didn't flinch. "Then take pride in knowing your son learned from you how to build." "Let me build." They stared each other down, years of stubbornness lined up like bricks. Finally, Thomas gave a tiny nod, not consent, exactly, but the absence of a no. Work surged. Hammers thudded in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat returning. David led from the front, crawling into the crawlspace to inspect the foundation, plotting sister joists to shore the east beam, mapping a new breaker panel with neat labels. Lisa moved through the house, weaving beauty from rubble. She salvaged a chest of drawers from the attic, scrubbing until its wood glowed, then repurposed it as a bathroom vanity. She steamed the water stains from old family photos she'd found, the edges curling back to life. In the kitchen, she held up 2 paint swatches to the morning light and smiled. "This one," she said. "It feels like hope that has hands." In quieter hours, when the crew died down and the late sun slanted through the dusty windows, Evelyn hovered at thresholds. She brought lemonade no one asked for. She straightened drop cloths that didn't need straightening. Sometimes she simply watched her son measure and cut, his movements clean, efficient, familiar. "Your father taught you that miter joint," she said one afternoon, voice hitching. David glanced up. "He did." She nodded, eyes wet. "He'll never say it, but he's proud. He's so tired." David set the saw aside, the room buzzing in the gap. "We'll make it easier," he said. "All of it." On the 3rd week, a storm rolled in. The roofers worked against the clock as thunder grumbled like an old grievance. David scaled the ladder, rain needling his face. "Hey!" Lisa shouted from below, hand on her belly. "Don't you dare be a hero. You promised me forever." He grinned down, reckless and young for a second. Forever requires a ridge cap. By dusk, the new roof held. Water slid off in elegant sheets instead of sneaking through seams. Inside, the ceiling breathed, unburdened. The next day, they turned the power off and began the rewiring. David snaked new lines, stapled them in tidy paths. He labeled junctions with neat block letters. The old panel came down like a bad habit. Thomas hovered at the doorway, arms crossed. "You always did hate messy cables," he muttered. David glanced back. "You always said, mess now is meltdown later." A twitch near Thomas's mouth. Maybe a smile. Maybe a memory. By week 5, floors gleamed, the banisters would drank oil like thirst after a fast. Lisa layered in softness, linen curtains that caught the light, a hand-woven throw over the restored sofa, a single green plant near the window like a breath. One evening, as David sanded the final patch on the dining room wall, Evelyn approached with a box. "I found these in the attic," she said. "Thought you might," she trailed off. David opened it. Inside, a tangle of little boy was preserved, trading cards, a cracked magnifying glass, a paper airplane baked brittle by summers. At the bottom lay a sketchbook. He flipped it open to a picture of the house, drawn in a child's careful lines, the oak tree too big, the roof a proud triangle. "Mom," he said softly. She looked at the wall, at the same room where years ago words had been hurled like plates. "I made stew," she said abruptly. "For the crew." "It's nothing." "It's everything," Lisa replied from the doorway, sincere. They ate at the newly sanded table, bowls in hand, laughter filling the room in cautious trickles. Even Thomas took a spoonful, eyes on his lap, jaw working. After dinner, when the crew cleared, David glanced at the mantel and hesitated. He pulled a photo from his pocket, the one Lisa had dried and flattened. It showed his parents on their wedding day, young, stubborn, beautiful, their smiles like bright weapons. He set it on the mantel. It belonged here. They all did. As the sun slid down, Lisa took David's hand, guiding him to the living room. "Close your eyes," she said. He obeyed. She placed something in his palm, a small, worn key tied to a ribbon. He opened his eyes. "The original front door key," she said softly. "Found it under the bottom stair tread." He turned it over, weighted by steel and story. "Feels like forgiveness." She leaned closer. "Feels like foreshadowing." David laughed, then sobered, looking around. Every wall hummed with the past and the possibility of a different future. "Tomorrow," he said, "we finish the upstairs bath and the crown molding. Then, it's time." Lisa met his gaze. "The reveal." He nodded, a slow inhale steadying the storm inside him. "Yeah. It's time to invite them, to see a property I'm working on." Outside, wind rustled the oak. Inside, the air shifted, a house exhaling after a long, hard winter. They didn't know it yet, but hidden under those floorboards lay a box they hadn't found, letters written and never sent, a private river of regret and love. But that, like all things meant to change a family, would wait for the right knock, the right morning, the right courage. For now, the renovation was almost complete, and so was the first bridge back to one another. The house gleamed in the afternoon sun. Fresh paint caught the light, the new roof's clean lines cutting sharp against the blue sky. Inside, every room was warm and intentional, not just renovated, but reborn. David stood in the center of the living room, running his fingers along the smooth grain of the restored mantel. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He took a steadying breath and dialed. "Dad. Hey. I'm working on a property I'd like you and Mom to see. Thought you could give me some feedback." A pause. Then Thomas's low voice, "We're not in the mood for tours." "Humor me," David said gently. "Just this once." The next afternoon, David parked their car in front of 84 Maple Lane. Evelyn and Thomas stepped out, looking around, puzzled. "This street," Evelyn murmured. David kept his face neutral. "Come on inside." The front door opened to the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers. Sunlight poured through the cleaned windows, catching on brass fixtures and the gleam of refinished floors. Thomas's steps slowed. Evelyn's eyes darted to the crown molding, the repaired banister, the color on the walls, exactly as she had kept it years ago. "This," Evelyn whispered, "this is our house." Thomas turned to David, jaw tight. "Why did you bring us here?" David met his father's stare. "Because I wanted you to see what it could look like again." Evelyn's voice trembled. You bought it?" David nodded. "At the foreclosure auction. We couldn't let it be torn apart by strangers." Thomas's face hardened, pride bristling. "We didn't ask for your help." David stepped closer. "No. But I didn't do this for a thank you. I did it because it's home. And because you're my parents, whether we agree or not." Evelyn's lips quivered. "We were wrong. About you. About Lisa." Lisa, who had been standing quietly near the doorway, spoke up. "We all had our reasons back then. Some good, some not so good. But maybe this is our chance to start over." Evelyn's gaze flicked to the framed wedding photo on the mantel, the one Lisa had restored. Her voice cracked. "I can't believe you kept this." "I kept everything worth keeping," David said softly. Silence hung heavy. Thomas finally sank into a chair, elbows on his knees. "When you told us Lisa was pregnant, I panicked. I thought you'd throw your life away like I did." David frowned. "What are you talking about?" Thomas's eyes were fixed on the floor. "I was 21 when your mother told me she was expecting. I wasn't ready. I made mistakes. We lost our first baby because I didn't take care of things like I should have. I promised myself I'd never let my son repeat my failures." Evelyn's hand went to his shoulder. Her eyes were wet. "You thought pushing him away would protect him." Thomas nodded. "I thought, if you stayed here, you'd feel trapped. And I blamed Lisa, unfairly, for a future I thought you couldn't handle." David's throat tightened. "You didn't protect me, Dad. You just left me without my family when I needed it most." Thomas's voice was gravel. "I see that now." The room was still, except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Then Thomas looked up. "I'm sorry, son." It wasn't much, but it was more than David ever expected. The weeks that followed felt different. Evelyn began stopping by the worksite with homemade bread and pies, for the crew, but always setting aside a slice for Lisa. Thomas offered to help with finishing touches, muttering that no point letting amateurs mess up the grout lines, but everyone knew it was his way of staying close. By the time the house was move-in ready, there was no need for a formal transfer or legal dance. David and Lisa handed over the keys in the kitchen, and Evelyn's hands trembled as she took them. "You're giving this back to us," she whispered. "It was always yours," David said. Evelyn hugged him for the first time in years. Thomas, awkward but sincere, clapped his son's shoulder and didn't let go right away. Soon, Sunday dinners returned. Mia toddled through the halls that once echoed with David's own childhood steps. Evelyn read her bedtime stories in the same chair she'd read to David. Thomas taught her to whistle, badly, in the backyard. Christmas came, and for the first time in a long while, everyone sat around the same table. There were still unspoken things, but there was also laughter, and that was a start. It happened on a quiet spring morning. Lisa was cleaning upstairs while Mia played on the rug. She decided to finally tackle the creaky floorboard in the corner of the bedroom. She pried it up carefully, and found a dusty, tin box. Inside were stacks of letters, bound with faded ribbon. Lisa opened the top one. Her breath caught. "Dear David, I'm sorry. I miss you every day. I keep expecting you to walk through the door and tell me it was all a misunderstanding. If you read this someday, I hope you'll forgive me." They were all from Evelyn. Letters written over the years, but never sent. Lisa flipped to the last one, dated just 6 months before the foreclosure. "I don't know how much longer we can hold on here. Your father's pride won't let me ask for help. I pray one day you come home, and bring her with you." Lisa's eyes blurred. She tucked the letters back and waited until David returned from the store. He read them in silence, the only sound the shifting of paper. When he reached the last one, he closed his eyes, a tear slipping down. "They wanted us back, long before they could say it," Lisa whispered. David nodded, voice rough. "And now, we are." He put the letters in a small wooden box on the mantel, right under the family photo. This time, there were no black garbage bags on the porch, only the sound of Mia's laughter drifting through the open windows, and the smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen. The house at 84 Maple Lane had finally become what it was meant to be. Not perfect, but whole. The end.